what we've decided to do is come up with an alternative manufacturing process that will allow us to make all of these cannabinoids or any of these cannabinoids individually at a reasonable cost so that we can not only research them, but we can build a commercial product around that.
From MJBulls Media, it's the Raising Cannabis Capital Show. Today we're continuing our Raising Cannabis Capital series with Eric Adams, the CEO of InMed Pharmaceuticals, which is a publicly traded Canadian biopharmaceutical company. Eric, thanks for being on the MJBulls podcast.
I appreciate the invitation. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's universally accepted that cannabis is medicine and has the potential to cure just about every disease. I'm going to get a little technical for a minute here, but I think this is really important. One of the reasons that cannabis is so effective is that our bodies have a system called the endocannabinoid system. Can you talk a little bit about the endocannabinoid? Just give us a brief overview of how it works and why it's so important.
Sure. Well, the endocannabinoid system is receptors that are located throughout the body, and they're being found in most tissues, most organs. And the human body itself produces two cannabinoids, endocannabinoids. So we make them ourselves, and these drugs that our body naturally makes regulate a number of things. It regulates mood, appetite, pain, a number of different things. What's interesting about these receptors is they also interact directly with cannabinoids, or this class of compounds that can be found in nature, and they're found in very high volumes in the cannabis plant. So the cannabis plant makes over 100 different chemicals called cannabinoids, and these interact naturally with the human body. And that's why we're seeing so many diverse effects of cannabinoids and the cannabis plant treating disease in humans.
I mean, it's just fascinating that it's been there all along. So the various combination of ratios of different cannabinoids have different impacts on the body. Is that how it works?
Well, we believe so. What we do know is that people who use cannabis can mitigate a lot of the symptoms of diseases that we see. What's not fully understood is the role of each individual cannabinoid. So as I said, there's over 100 of them. And that's really what InMed is setting out to do, is to look at these individual drugs themselves and find out where they're best suited to treat diseases in the human body. And what we're finding is that there are some exceptionally severe diseases that don't have any treatments right now where cannabinoids may play a very important role. And we're just now scratching the surface.
Well, I see that in some cases, it's just tiny, tiny traces of the cannabinoid in combination with a number of different cannabinoids to create the impact on the patient that we'd hope for. But to get the quantity of that trace element is really hard to do. And I see on your website that you guys use a biosynthesis technique that you guys have developed. I think you need to explain this better than I, because it's so interesting.
Yeah, so we know that there's these 100 different cannabinoids. When you take the marijuana plant and you extract out all these cannabinoids, you get primarily two. You get THC and CBD. And those two account for probably over 90% of the amount you can get at. All the other cannabinoids, these individual compounds, are in very small amounts. And it's so small that you can't even really economically isolate them from the plant and then do any research on them. These things can cost tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars per gram if you try to isolate it from the plant. So what we've decided to do is come up with an alternative manufacturing process that will allow us to make all of these cannabinoids or any of these cannabinoids individually at a reasonable cost so that we can not only research them, but we can build a commercial product around that. And so that's what biosynthesis is. If you start with the plant has a number of different genes that will say, okay, this gene will tell the plant to make this cannabinoid. Well, what we're doing is we're taking that same gene and we're putting it into bacteria. And we've come up with a way to manipulate the bacteria so that it can produce cannabinoids the same way the plant would produce cannabinoids. And that's a big part of our technology, is kind of unlocking the ability to access these cannabinoids and then further research them into individual diseases.
That is just fascinating. So you'll be able to produce large quantities of otherwise nearly impossible traces of these really small doses of cannabinoids using this process.
That's the game plan. So we still have that process in development. We're now headed towards what we call commercial scale-up, where We've proven it at a small scale. Now we need to use industrial size equipment to be able to make vast quantities of these things at a very low cost. And so we're in the process of going through that scale-up exercise now.
Well, you also have some drugs that you have in the pipeline. I think these are really interesting, how these drugs. Maybe you could talk about each of the drugs and what they're for and how far along you are with each of these drugs.
Sure. So InMed is based on a couple of principles. First of all, we don't use any THC in our product. Now, THC has a lot of effects on the human body, but it also has the side effect of getting you high. And we think that that's a negative side effect for patients who really just want their diseases treated. So number one, no THC. Secondly, we are a topical company, so we are delivering the cannabinoids specifically to the site of disease. We think if we do that, we can use a very small amounts and minimize any systemic side effects that you might see from using these drugs. We're looking at things like creams for the skin and eye drops for the eye to treat various diseases. And there's a plethora of diseases that we can start to address with that approach.
Okay.
So what we've done is we've identified a couple of cannabinoids of interest that we think have a high potential to treat a number of diseases that currently don't have any alternatives. The first one that we have is, the name of the drug is INM-750. It is a combination of two cannabinoids that is directed towards treating a rare, genetic, absolutely horrible skin disease called epidermolysis bullosa. This is also referred to as the butterfly child syndrome because the skin is so fragile that it can fall off and cause large open wounds over big areas of the body. It's absolutely devastating, and currently there's no approved products for that. And what we've learned about cannabinoids is they can do a couple of interesting things. First of all, from a symptom standpoint, what are the symptoms of this disease that need to be treated on a daily or every other day basis? You need to accelerate the wound healing. You need to reduce pain. You need to reduce the itch, which is often worse than the pain. You need to reduce inflammation, and you need to give some kind of antibacterial coverage to prevent infection. Well, it turns out cannabinoids can do all of those things. If you select the right ones, you can do all five of those things. And so we think from a symptom standpoint, we can help these patients a great deal with one product that can do all those things. The other side of the equation is disease itself. Now, this is a genetic disease, so unless you come up with a gene therapy to correct those genes, you aren't going to cure, quote unquote, the disease. But we think we can mitigate the disease and potentially see some reversal. What we've learned about cannabinoids is they upregulate and downregulate these proteins that are found throughout the body called keratins. And one form of EB is related to a keratin that is genetically malformed. We can't correct that, but what we can do is we can increase the production in the body of a keratin that may be able to replace the one that's damaged. So, in effect, seeing some disease reversal by the body kind of finding a way to heal itself.
Wow.
And we know that cannabinoids can increase or decrease certain of these proteins called keratins. So that's a very unique approach, and it's something that we're very excited about.
Well, I saw the photographs of some of the people with this illness, and it's just horrifying. I can't imagine, especially for a little kid. What?
Yeah.
Talk about the other two drugs that you're working on.
Sure. So we have another drug candidate called INM-085. This is a cannabinoid that's targeting glaucoma. You know, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of people who smoke marijuana are able to relieve the pain and pressure of glaucoma. Glaucoma is, I think, the second leading cause of blindness in adults for a host of reasons. But we think it's a very interesting approach. We think that cannabinoids will have some unique benefits in treating this disease. And so we not only are pursuing the cannabinoid for that, we've also developed a once-a-day eye drop that we think is unique and should be able to increase the amount of drug that is able to affect the eye. So we're very excited about that program as well. A little bit behind 750, the 750 product for EB. We're targeting to be in human clinical trials in the second half of 2019, and we're on track to do that. Okay. So glaucoma is a little bit farther behind that. And then we have a third product, INM-405, and this is for pain. It would come as no surprise to most people that cannabinoids can treat pain. And again, you go back to people who smoke marijuana to relieve pain. We're looking at a specific cannabinoid, a non-THC cannabinoid, that can have the same kinds of effects that THC does, just without getting the patient high.
Okay.
Again, we're looking at a topical approach, So it'll be a skin cream. And in particular, we're looking at things that are related to migraines, very severe pain that currently the treatments just aren't sufficient for. And if you see people who suffer from migraines, you see them massaging their temples to try and relieve that. Well, there's a nerve right there just below the skin that is responsible for all of the nerve endings in the face. So for people who suffer any kind of jaw pain or tooth pain or what have you, you can access that nerve with a topical cream and hopefully mitigate not only common pain but also more severe forms of pain.
So InMed is a publicly traded company right now, and you're on the Toronto Stock Exchange and the OTCQX. What are your stock symbols?
In Canada, on the TSX, our stock symbol is IN, and in the U.S., on the OTC exchange, it's IMLFF.
Well, we're going to have all the information from InMed Pharmaceuticals on the MJBulls website. Eric, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Absolutely. And again, I think there's a lot of companies out there who are starting to explore these kinds of applications of cannabinoids. And part of what we're trying to do with the Biosynthesis program is enable other people as well to access any of these 100 cannabinoids that they think might work for a specific disease. Someone's got to be able to make those and provide them to other people. So if we can arrange, some kind of licensing agreement with other companies, we think it's going to just lift the whole field, and that you'll see a lot more companies like ours looking at a very broad array of different diseases in the not too distant future.
Well, this has to be a community effort. There's just too many pieces to this puzzle for any one group to take it all on themselves. So, well, I appreciate everything that you're doing, Eric. Thank you again for being on the show.
Nice talking with you. Thank you so much.